we'll do, and I'm sure it will be okay with Greg, we'll just quickly get these two out of the way. There's no extraordinary business, no notices of motion. And Greg, would you like to talk in the local board slot at the beginning of the State of the Waitakere Ranges Heritage Area item, which is right now? So, warm welcome to Greg as Chair of our Waitakere Ranges Local Board. Kia ora and welcome.
Morena Te Committee. I'm here to speak briefly to the Waitakere Ranges Heritage Area monitoring report item. This is the second monitoring report. The Act is now 10 years old. Time flies. And we've asked that this report be dedicated to Denise Yates. The report's commissioned under the Waitakere Ranges Heritage Area Act. It's something that you, Madam Chair, and I were involved in the creation of, and Councillors Clow and Kupu were involved in its gestation and in its finalisation. My brief description of the Act is that it was an attempt to provide for meaningful protection of the ranges and to protect against the cumulative degradation and subdivision of the ranges which was happening through conventional RMA processes. At the time it was controversial, caused considerable debate in the community, but I'm pleased to say that 10 years on things have settled down and erstwhile opponents of the legislation are now at peace with the law and people are proud to live in a statutorily recognised heritage area. So it's been quite a turnaround to what it was like before. The report itself is very important. It's meant to assess how well the Act is performing, how well Council is going in its statutory obligation to protect and to enhance the area, and what threats the area is facing. The document before you is a complex one and an impressive collation of lots of information. The original focus of the Act, which was subdivision, is working out, in my view, as intended, as shown by the report. Existing subdivision rights are being exercised, but growth predictions suggest that once these rights have been exercised, there should be no more, and the population pattern of the area should become very stable with no further encroachment into the area. Kari dieback features very heavily in the latest report, and I should thank Council for taking the strong and determined action required to protect this taonga. I wish to acknowledge Te Karo Amaki, who have provided commentary for the report, which I would describe as being constructive but critical. They acknowledge that much good has been achieved. At page 13 of the report, they neatly summarise the current situation, where they talk about increase in the total area of ecosystems protected and reserves, dramatic decrease of subdivision, update survey of priority known archaeological sites, and initiating a program to help address contamination in the West Coast lagoons. But they also focus on what needs to occur, particularly spread of reeds, alarming spread of Kari dieback, ecological quality of the lakes, and a lack of funding proportionate to a nationally significant area, and the uncontrolled growth of tourism and recreational activity in sensitive areas. They make recommendations which I think Council needs to seriously consider, and the starting point could be the starting of work on the deed of acknowledgement, which the legislation provides for, as anticipated by Section 29. And the final comment I would have is that the report's not meant to be a PR exercise. It's to show what's going right and what needs to be done, and I think it's a very important process for us to continue to do every 5 years. Those are all the comments I wish to make.
Thank you, Greg. So please feel free to ask any questions of clarification that you have of Greg, or they might actually just come up naturally in the course of the discussion. Councillor Cashmore.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Greg, thank you for your comments. Just met with some people out there who are concerned about the Act. In fact, in the non-bush areas where there's open land, and they feel that their property rights have been curtailed by the Act. Do you have any comment on that?
People are much more sanguine about it now than they were 10 years ago. It's settled down. There's there's still quite a bit of friction right on the edge of the heritage area, particularly in Aratia, and there's properties on the wrong side of the boundary who would love to be on the other side.
Yes.
But the trouble is, if you wish to draw a hard boundary and give certainty, then you do need a boundary that is secure. So I could probably name the people who are very concerned about what's happening to their property, but apart from allowing continuous incremental degradation of the area, I think you have to hold a hard line.
Thank you.
Okay. Question for Greg, Member Blair?
Oh, kia ora, Greg. I'm here for. You just mentioned deed of acknowledgement with the Te Kaurā Maki and Ngāti Whātua Rākei. What needs to be done here to progress that? And I'm also going to refer to the co-management and co-governance steering group. Just what needs to happen here, in your opinion?
I'm sure that in designing the deed, the co-governance would have to be addressed, and that would be a major part of the deed. I do not know where it sits within Council's work processes, but it was there at the beginning of the Act, and it was something that was meant to be done at some stage, although no timeline was given for that.
So
It might
just
be
a supplementary, we need to find out where it sits in Council in order to progress this. Is that with our Head of Governance?
So perhaps, Member Blair, can we wait till the item and
Okay.
ask that we'll actually have the staff here to do that? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for coming in and for your board's part in this. That's really critical. My question's around the conclusions around pest, plants and animals. And we know now that it's going to be even more difficult to have people, you know, with the bait lines, etc., with having people in the ranges. We know that more walking around spreads kāri dieback. Has the board got any views around alternate ways of pest management in terms of fauna?
Just that we have to have a big think about where the pest lines are. The first 5-yearly monitoring report suggested that the pest lines and the bait lines were possible causes of spread of the disease. So I think we just have to remap them and keep them well away from Kāri. And I wish there was a simple answer to that, because we're facing either degradation through the loss of Kāri or degradation through pests, and it's a matter of which is going to get worse.
Have to look at alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Okay, thank you very much, Greg, and we'll note the local board presentation. I'll move that. Councillor Cooper will second. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, I'd now like to invite Erin up, and just before Erin starts, I do want to acknowledge what Greg was saying. I think for Councillor Cooper, Councillor Clow and myself, this is, you know, it's certainly 12 years ago, prior to the Act getting passed, 12, 13, 14 years ago, I know in conjunction with Councillor Lee and the Auckland Regional Council, Paul Warbrand, Sandra Coney, and a small group of us, we negotiated this with the very people that Bill Cashmore's talking about, and we tried to strike that balance between the landowners and the people who opposed this loudly at very large meetings in very large packing sheds in Oratia, and our environmental community who accused us of not moving fast enough. And we negotiated this over a course of, I think, 1 or 2 elections where this was a hard-fought issue. We worked particularly closely with Te Kaurau Amaki, and the Heritage Area Act was born. It hasn't been a panacea, and nor has it solved all the problems with the Waitakere Ranges, as everyone would have observed. You know, we're right in the middle of the battle for our kauri, but it certainly has been a very good state of the environment report for this area. So I realise, and we will talk about the issues of co-management and co-governance and the process for discussing that. But the focus for today is actually the what is effectively the state of the environment report for the Waitakere Ranges. So I would like to hand over to Erin, who has been part of this right since the beginning, and just acknowledge you, and I was going to say your team, but a lot of this is just you, Erin, doing this work. So on behalf of the West, thank you. We're in your hands.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you for those kind words. There is a large team behind me. I couldn't do this without them, and I thoroughly appreciate their effort. I have a series of PowerPoint presentations to run through, and I understand you have hard copies of those.
It's on the hub as well.
I'd just like to, the image on screen is Huia and the earth dam that is the Lower Nihutupu, and that in itself is a feat of engineering, and we chose Huia as the cover page because that is where Denise Yates resided, and so we thought that would be a useful and appropriate image to place on the front cover.
Nice.
This morning I'm just going to run through the highlights of the document. The document itself is nearly 300 pages. I'd just like to say that it is an aggregation of information, data and input from council departments, CCOs, members of the public, community organisations, and every other nook and cranny that we could find, and so it has taken the better part of a year to put together. It's meant to be a monitoring report, and so it is not a policy-making document. The intention behind it is that this assists you, the governing body and the local board and the other committees, to make decisions about the Waitaku Ranges heritage area. And I know that you've been rather exercised by the issues associated with kauri dieback. And one of the observations I've had about that is that there is a great deal of land in the ranges that is not in the regional park, and there's the better part of 20,000 people living there. So it is a very complex and fully meshed environment that is not just about the environment, and so I'll run through the various topics, and that will help illustrate to you the findings over the last year or so of work. So I'll just hopefully work the pointer. So the heritage area, the majority of the heritage area is contained within the Waitaku Ranges Local Board, and there is parts in the Faux Local Board, particularly along the area that is known as Green Bay, and there's also, if I can point, a sliver that runs up the coast in the Rodney Local Board area that was formerly Rodney District. As I understand it, while that is the current boundary, the forest actually continues on in the hinterland away from the coast and further north. So I think the Waitaku Ranges Local Board has pretty much taken the lead on a lot of this. We, through staff work, continue to provide advice to the Faux and Rodney local boards as they ask for it, and when we have information that might be useful to their consideration of their part of the Waitaku Ranges. The Heritage Area Act itself, which is now 10 years old, Council is charged with the duty of giving effect to that, and that is partly through developing and implementing what are known as local area plans, utilising the resource management framework, which is the unitary plan and resource consents, having regard to the Act when making decisions which are either policy or operational across the Council, and also the Waitaku Ranges Regional Park Management Plan, which is obviously a large component of the forest. In terms of monitoring, the legislation requires that we report at 5-yearly intervals on the state of the environment, our progress towards achieving the objectives of the Act, and there's a number of those, and also the funding impact from activities that are occurring in the Act. So we've tried to do that in the report. Through the development of the report, we've engaged with Te Kaurau Maki and Ngāti Whātua, and also we've also met and provided public information evening to hear from members of the public who have an interest in this, to glean from them gems of information and leads to follow up in terms of data and information to contribute to the report. And as I've said at the start, we thought it appropriate, and the local board endorsed dedicating the report to Denise. And in terms of the local board, they have a focus on the local area plans. 5 of those have been completed, and the board continues to implement the actions identified in those. And their local board plan is reflective of matters to do with the heritage area as well. In terms of the process of preparing this, as I've said, we worked across council departments, CCOs, utilising our REMU people, particularly our biosecurity, biodiversity parks, which is both regional and local park staff, our consenting teams, our heritage teams, water care, Auckland Transport, AT, the local board, and mana whenua. In this report, we have some new topics. One is aquatic ecosystems, which is, oops, wrong button, which is about the quality of coastal lagoons, and this is the Piha Lagoon. We've also had work done on the darkness of the night sky, and this is the night sky at Whatapu in terms of the stars that you can see, and also engaging with water care to talk with them and have them provide information about the water catchment, and this is the Nihotupu spillway, which in itself is an incredible piece of engineering. In terms of the first topic, Indigenous, terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems, this is a large part of the report because there's a myriad of these, and they are essentially an integrated whole, but you can separate out a great deal of specific issues. Obviously, the key issue is Kauri dieback, but we were cognizant of not making this another Kauri dieback report, so it's definitely front and centre, but it's not the only issue that we traverse. Pest and plant animals, whoops. Here's our opossum. We've got more than enough of them. And what we've found is that plant pests and animal pests continue to make inroads into the ecological integrity of the heritage area, and there's in our community section there's a massive effort on behalf of community groups, local people and council organisations working on these issues. This is a long-tail bat, and the local board has supported further monitoring and investigation of these little critters. It is now known that they actually spread as far as Henderson Valley, Opanuku, and whereas previously 10 years ago they were thought to not actually be in the Waitakere Ranges, so we've done a lot of work there. I've yet to see one myself, but as you can see they're tiny, and one day maybe. We've also added lots of land to the park in the form of 98 additional hectares, and 34 of those 98 hectares is ecologically significant habitat. I have an image here of the Tihinga wetland, which is a massive one of the 2 largest wetlands in the region, and an image about some of the effects of human activity on those wetlands. Next topic is natural landforms and landscapes. What we've done here is we engaged Malene Absalom, who is a landscape architect, of some renown, and she has been to a number of places between 50 and 100 places in 2008, 2012 and 2017, and taken photos of the same landscapes over that time, and has provided us with a report. What she says is that essentially the landscapes remain intact. You do get development, and this is in Karikari, so you get the occasional prominent building that sort of sticks out of the landscape. This is another one that 5 years ago there was a significant large tree in here, so it obscured this building, and now that tree has now been removed. So aside from some minor effects on landscape, she concludes that the landscape is intact. One of the big topics that has emerged in the last 5 years is recreational use of the heritage area, and you've heard a great deal about this in terms of the Kari dieback context. This is car parks. You know, this is the sort of thing that happens every week at places like Piha. You know, we have the Hillary Trail, which, you know, is now sort of closed. We have campgrounds, this is Piha, and lots of walking tracks, and you're well familiar with those issues. We'd also note that the number of concessionaires, which are people who are licensed to take people into the ranges, has grown over the last 5 years. And filming, whether it be television commercials, television shows or movies, or corporate images, is the largest commercial activity in the ranges, and the beaches are a regular use, and also the forest. We've also just been interested in the use of social media in terms of recreation, and we've heard from our regional parks people where they see increasing people on tracks where social media has advertised the existence of tracks, and also off-track activity. We've also come across a thing called geocaching, which is a sort of an orienteering, and there's a lot of off-track geocache sites that people can go and click onto and add to the geocaches that they've been to. So heritage is a mixed blessing in that lots of people are using the opportunity that the heritage area provides, but there are issues associated with the volume of people as well, and what they do when they get there. In terms of development and consent activity, there's been a marked reduction in the number of subdivisions and land use consents. It doesn't mean that all development has stopped there, and I note, Councillor Cashmore, that your question was very pertinent 10 years ago, and in the last 5 years we've been through the unitary plan process where the former Waitakere City Legacy Plan provisions have been translated into the unitary plan. However, most of the consenting activity in the last 5 year periods was under the old Waitakere plan, so we're suggesting that the next 5 year report in 2023 really applies some scrutiny as to how the new provisions are working. What we've seen is that subdivision activity has reduced markedly, down from 110 or so subdivisions from 2008 to 2012, down to about 36 from 2012 to 2017. And there's a consequent reduction in the number of land use activities. My suspicious mind suggests that maybe people are just getting on and doing it without obtaining consents, but we have no real basis other than my suspicious mind for that. So, what we see here, this is a building in Piha. This is the sort of activity that is happening, new driveways which are white concrete with amenity planting alongside, and the occasional building that is currently prominent in the landscape. This is one of Malene Absalom's photographs, but her view is that in 5 years, when the vegetation has grown, that these types of buildings will be far more obscured. People and communities, this is this was often considered to be the lost part of the Heritage Act, and there are 20,000 people who live there. There's many small businesses that operate in the ranges. We have the Huia store here, which is definitely worth an ice cream if you ever go past. Titirangi is our main town within the heritage area, and this is a planting day for a community group. There's definitely less people here than the rest of Auckland, and the population remains somewhat static. We've provided some census data where we could about the demographic profile of this group of people. What we've found is that, essentially everybody who lives there is passionate about the ranges, and that is given voice through many community groups and organisation, and also the volunteers and the surf clubs and the emergency services and all of those other types of activities. And so a very motivated group of people who actually do a great deal to assist the well-being of the heritage area itself. Heritage and scheduled trees. Following on from the 2012 report, the local board has provided funding to our heritage department to do further archaeological work all along the Manukau coast and up through to Piha. So we report back on that, and what that has been a large process of data cleaning. Often we would have several different notations for the same heritage site, and then going out on and actually identifying where the actual site is. So the image on the left here is a midden on the Manukau foreshore. We've also been through the unitary plan process, and that has included identifying significant trees, and here is a rather large pahutakawa. And so that has been an improvement that has been achieved through the unitary plan in terms of scheduling specific prominent individual trees. Finally, our friends at Watercare have provided a section on this report. They obviously have a number of designations throughout the ranges that overlap with the regional park quite often, and they have some massive structures, dams and water treatment facilities. The dams themselves are iconic and dramatic, and they actually provide for some stunning landscapes. The Waitakere Ranges provides 19% of Auckland's drinking water, and so it is a significant strategic asset in terms of the ongoing ability of Auckland to operate. Watercare do a large number of programs in terms of water quality and water monitoring, and here's a chap doing water quality testing. They also work in terms of supporting fish passage through their stream systems and weed and pest management within their catchment. So we've got a new section compared to the 2012 report, which identifies the activities of Watercare. They have some new and increasing challenges, Watercare say, in terms of bacteria and algae in the reservoirs, and so they are constantly having to refine what they do and how they manage their water supply. That's an ongoing challenge for them. So that brings me to the end of the summary of the report. It is large, and following the approval by this committee, all going well today, we expect to print the document, and the local board and ward councillors are discussing a launch event, and there will be a summary as well provided, which will be also available for people who are interested in the headlines but not the detail. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Fantastic presentation. Thank you very much, Aaron. Right, I'm sure there will be questions. Councillor Clow.
Thank you, Aaron. I have two questions. And the second one relates to an amendment I put up, or I should say a new C, which I'll point out. But the first one is just, as you know at the time, because you were a staff member at Waitakere, it wasn't all plain sailing between Waitakere Council and the ARC and Waitakere and the ARC with Rodney. So one of the areas of tension that we did resolve was the local area plans being included, so a requirement for LAPs. So my first question is, have the LAPs, are they working?
Okay.
So that's my first question. The second question is the issue of the rangers stopping at Teihanga because we really could not convince Rodney to embrace the concept and the concept and the vision of having it, and therefore if you could just comment on how much further the ranges actually extend beyond Teihanga. I mean, it's a couple of kilometres, but if you could just, and how much of that is actually just pure bush. Just two questions.
Through the chair, the first question, the local area plans, there is currently 5 completed, one for Oratia and one for Henderson Valley / Waitarua, one for Bethel's Tehinga, one for what we call Muddy Creeks, which is Waimar, Woodlands Park, Parau, Langhome, and sorry, one for, yeah, so that's where that's the local.
Rangi, has that been completed?
No,
No.
So there are a number of areas in the heritage area that do not yet have a local area plan completed. Through the local board, they utilise the actions identified in the local area plans to inform their local board plan and also the work program that they advocate for with council departments. The board has seen that across the 5 local area plans there's well over 100 different actions, and so they made a decision a couple of years ago to not fund the production of any further ones, but to rather focus on what they had in terms of implementing those actions. The monitoring report makes a recommendation that additional laps be worked on and completed. So it's a work in progress. Does that answer your question?
Yep, that's fine. And
secondly, I have to say I wasn't intimately involved in the development of the boundary of where the Rangers heritage area was. I understand that there is forest further north in what was old Rodney district that could usefully be added to the heritage area. The process for doing that is through a order in council by Parliament, which is somewhat easier than removing land from the heritage area, which takes an amendment to the Act. And so there is engagement with central government associated with any addition to the heritage area. To establish exactly where that boundary might be, we would need to engage some ecologists and forest savvy people to understand where the extent of that is. And it's not necessarily just forest, it's also the wetlands and river systems that are attached to that area. So there would be some investigation work required.
thank you, Aaron. I suppose I'm hoping that one of the Waitakere Rangers councillors will second this amendment.
I'm actually happy to move the whole ABC, and if you second that.
Right.
Now, any other questions? Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you for the report. Very simple question. Those little villages we have on the boundary of the Waitakere Rangers Park, are they expanding in size much?
Through the chair, generally not. What we've observed is with the reduction in the number of subdivisions, what is actually happening is that there is a large number of essentially vacant sites that are now being developed, and they were subdivided in the 1960s, 70s. So they've lain vacant, but given the housing issues in Auckland, they have become more viable in terms of putting houses on. And so the land use, the number of houses continues to increase, but it's not necessarily via substantial subdivision. It's the development on existing
So the
individual
blatant
lots.
titles. that were there.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillor Cashmore. Right, I will put the recommendations. I've moved, councillor Close seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Erin. Appreciate that huge effort that's gone into this. And Greg, thank you to the Waitakere Rangers local board for their ongoing stewardship and passion for this wonderful area. Thank you. Right, we might, members, in keeping with sound and sensible health, I'm actually going to recommend a 5-minute break, and I'll tell you for why. My Fitbit tells me every hour when we should move, and having just read an article published by one of the very reputable medical journals, people of our age should move every hour. So please get up and move. Have a very quick comfort stop, and we'll be back here in 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, I think that's a really good precedent to set. It is sitting as the cancer of our age.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we are, my Fitbit holds